You want to understand how Paraglide JS works under the hood, and in this video, you're going to understand how. At the heart, Paraglide JS is a compiler, and that compiler takes your translations, your messages, and emits JavaScript code. That JavaScript code is highly optimized to be tree-shaken by your bundler, so every time your application calls a message like here, m.jojo mountain day, your bundler will tree-shake everything that is not related to that message. Okay, so Paraglide JS is a compiler, and compiler needs to compile the translations. Where are the translations coming from? They're coming from an inlang project. This is what you have here on the left, project.inlang. It is saved as a directory here in Git. By the time you watch the video, it might be saved as a file somewhere. Now, what is that inlang file? That inlang file is an open file format which stores the translations, the messages that you have in your application. And the beauty of it is it's an open file format that provides an SDK that you can just build apps on top of. And one of those apps happens to be Paraglide JS. So if we look at the architecture diagram, the compiler opens this project, and I can show you the code. Here it is. This is the compile function of Paraglide JS, and you can see that Paraglide JS just loads this inlang project, and this function is coming from the inlang SDK. Now, the next thing that Paraglide JS does is it compiles the messages that it receives from the inlang project into JavaScript code. And this is what we get. Messages.js, registry.js, runtime.js, and server.js. Now, let's look at the input and output that we're getting for the messages. Here, this is how we store our messages as a JSON file. And we have Jojo Mountain Day, hello username, how are you? What Paraglide JS does now is it takes this message and compiles it down into JavaScript. So here's this message, and here's this message in a compiled form. Very, very simple. This is a simple message, at least. Now, the beautiful thing that happens here is we can now just call this JavaScript function anywhere in our application. And that's exactly what I'm doing here. m.jojo mountain day imports the messages from messages.js and towards your application. This is just a JavaScript function, which here it checks which locale you're rendering, but if you're in EN, this is just hello username, how are you? There is no side effect, there is nothing, which now enables your bundler to tree-shake that function. Let me demonstrate this. I added a new function call here, which is m.unused, and we're console logging this. So this unused message is now used. And if we build the example and now look at the code the bundler emits, we can see that here, if we look for unused, there we are. This unused message is now bundled into the output because we're using it in the code. But look what happens if we get rid of unused. What happens now is the bundler detects that, hey, we're not using unused. So if I search for unused, it's gone. Just like this. No complex runtime that somehow needs to detect, oh, are you using this message? Are you not using this message? No, you're very explicitly in code, just referencing a tree-shakable message function, which is just a JavaScript function. It's so beautiful. And thereby the bundler knows, okay, I can just tree-shake this. And this is how Paraglide JS, so to say, leverages bundlers to achieve one of the most difficult things in any one library. Namely, how do you separate the translations, the messages that are displayed on the UI? In this UI, you have two messages: get the driver's seat to get paid and pay $23. If you have 10,000 messages in your entire project, how do you know that only those messages will be rendered? Well, the bundler knows, and the bundler gets rid of it. And by Paraglide JS just emitting plain JavaScript functions, everything else just works. There are no framework integrations that are needed, at least for the front end. React, Vue, Svelte, it all works the same way. And you can be assured if Paraglide JS has a problem, it's most likely a problem that is Paraglide JS unrelated, because that is just pure JavaScript that any framework can work with. And to show you how well this approach of emitting tree-shakable message functions is, here is a complex message. Complex in the sense that we have gendering in here. We have different variants. So depending on the user input, whether they are on Android, on iOS, whether they're male or female, they get displayed a different message, a different variant. So this is the input, and look at the output. This is the output that Paraglide JS emits. Oh, cool. We have an interesting return there. But this is the output that Paraglide JS emits, and you can see here, this is basically handwritten JavaScript. You cannot write this in a more efficient way, especially if you minify this. Okay, so this is how Paraglide JS works. The things you need to just remember is Paraglide JS is a compiler that takes your messages from an inlang project and emits optimized tree-shakable JavaScript code. That tree-shakable code can then be processed by Vite or any other bundler to solve the hardest problem of an EY.NET library, which is I am only using the message Jojo Mountain Day on that particular screen, so only bundle that message. And by being so simple, it works in any framework.